Hello, here I am again in the name of the sovereign creator of heaven and earth, the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm continuing my exposition of my translation of Genesis. We are in chapter 29, verse 32. The sons keep coming. I will first read 29, 32 through 35, which will finish chapter 29. Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "Surely Jehovah has noticed my affliction, therefore now my husband will love me." And she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Surely Jehovah has heard that I am disregarded, and he has given me this one also." And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, "This time I will praise Jehovah." So she called his name Judah. And she stopped bearing. Just a few things here. But before that, I should have read a long piece about the whole business of the sons, which I'm now going to do. Now then, mainly I'm just commenting then the name, the meaning of the names. But from this passage, from 29:32 through 30:24, deals with the birth of Jacob's sons. It is the topic of the passage. The Hebrew discourse structure usually deals topic by topic without regard to the chronological sequence of events, and it can treat the same topic from different perspectives. Failure to take this factor into account has led commentators to misinterpret the phrase "when Rachel had given birth to Joseph" in chapter 30, verse 25. That saying is chronological, and the context makes it clear that it refers to the end of Jacob's 14 years of service for both wives. But Jacob did not receive Leah until after 7 years of service, and Rachel 7 solar days after Leah. It is clear that Reuben could not have been born before the 8th year of this service. Although the record mentions only one daughter, Dinah, chapter 37-35 makes clear that Jacob had other daughters, which would be normal after all, for it mentions, quote, "all his daughters," end quote. The difficulty is that the second 7-year period simply does not accommodate so many births, a difficulty that results from the mistake of assuming that 30:25 applies to the previous section. It is necessary to understand that the account of the births is independent of the time of Joseph's birth. Certainly a good number of the births occurred during the following 6 years. The text makes it clear that when Jacob left Paddan Aram after 20 years, he had 11 sons as well as Dinah. The birth of Joseph is included in the previous passage because it is part of the topic. Okay, now I'm going to comment the names. Reuben means, "look, the sun." Now, interestingly enough, Leah recognizes Jehovah by name. Now, Laban had the family idols, but Leah acknowledged Jehovah, which she also did with her second son. And verse 31 will say that it was Jehovah who opened her womb. With the fourth one, Judah, she praised Jehovah. And of course, it was through the fourth son, Judah, that the Messiah came, the Savior of the world. And his name means praise, by the way. Simeon means hearing, and Levi means attached. Okay, now let's go on to chapter 30. I'll read verses 1 through 8. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children or I will die." Then Jacob was angry with Rachel, and said, "Am I in God's place, who has withheld the fruit of the womb from you?" So she said, "Here is my maidservant Bilhah. Go into her, that she may bear children for me, that I also may be built up through her." And she gave him Bilhah, her maidservant, as wife, or as a wife. And Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged and has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "With the wrestlings of gods, quote unquote, I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. Now, as I've said before, according to the norms of Hebrew discourse, Rachel probably did not wait until the birth of Leah's fourth son before she gave Jacob her maidservant. Not necessary. Now, Rachel did the same thing with Bilhah that Rebekah had done with Hagar, only the outcome was quite different. Okay, Dan means judgment, and Naphtali means wrestling. Now, I put of gods in parentheses, with single quotes. That's what the Hebrew text actually says. How to interpret it is a question. I just put it the way it is. Now let's go on to verses 9 through 24. This is a long one, but that's what I have to do. Verses 9 through 24. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she also took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "A troop is coming." And she called his name Gad. Then Leah's maidservant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am, for the daughters will call me happy." And she named him Asher. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went out and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Was it a small thing that you took my husband? Would you also take my son's mandrakes?" Then Rachel said, "Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has given me my wages, for I have given my maidservant to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, "God has given me a good gift. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him six sons." And she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bore a daughter, and she called her name Dinah. And God remembered Rachel and listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my reproach." And she called his name Joseph, saying, "May Jehovah add to me another son." For the moment. Let's see a couple things here. Actually, the name of Gad, we aren't quite sure what the Hebrew means there. I put "a troop is coming," but we're not sure about that. As for the fifth one now, though it means Asher means happy. Now, this bit about the mandrakes. Leah, just like Esau did not remember, quote unquote, that he had sold the birthright, Leah did not remember, quote unquote, it was she who had stolen Jacob from Rachel in the beginning. But she now accuses Rachel of stealing Jacob. Oh well. But about the mandrakes, it just wasn't the mandrakes. It was God. God who opened the womb. But I ask, why was this episode even included in the historical record? Well, it seems that Jacob was no longer going to Leah, preferring the younger women. But God still had work for Leah to do, and he used the mandrakes to take Jacob back to her. The mandrakes, the fruit was supposed to help the conception. Now, I frankly don't understand why she named Issachar, because she said, "For I have given my maidservant to my husband." Well, I frankly don't see what one thing has to do with the other. Then again, I don't have to see. She called the name Issachar, salary, and then Zebulun, dwelling place. Well, I have my pages in the wrong order. That's how come I'm confused. I ask, why was Dinah even mentioned? Jacob had other daughters, as we know from 31:28. Sorry, in 31:28, Laban speaks of kissing my sons and my daughters. And since my sons certainly refers to his grandsons, likely that my daughters would refer to his granddaughters. In fact, as I've said, 37:35 mentions all his daughters. The point is, of course, that Dinah would play an important role later on, which is probably why she was mentioned. Now, Rachel said that God had taken away her reproach. At that time, a married woman without children was, in fact, looked down on. That was a reproach. You may remember that Elizabeth, Zachariah's wife, said the same thing when John the Baptizer was born. The name Joseph means to add. And here, by the way, you notice that Rachel actually recognized Jehovah by name, as Leah had already done several times. Okay, now let's go on to chapter 30, where God is going to enrich Jacob. I will read now verses 25 through 36. Now it happened when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go. For you know my service that I have done for you." Then Laban said to him, "Please, if I have found favor in your eyes, I have observed the signs, and Jehovah has blessed me for your sake." And he said, "Tell me the payment you want, and I will give it." So Jacob said to him, "You know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For the little that you had before I came has increased abundantly, and Jehovah has blessed you at my foot. And now, when shall I provide for my own house also?" So he said, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again feed and keep your flock. I will go through all your flock today, taking from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled goats, and they shall be my wages. So my righteousness will testify for me in time to come, when you come to me about my wages. Every goat that is not speckled and spotted, and every lamb that is not black, that is with me, will be considered stolen." Then Laban said, well, yes, let it be according to your word. That same day, Laban took the striped and spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, and each one with white spots and each black lamb, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Several things here. In verse 30, Laban recognized the truth that Jacob declared there. Laban did in verse 27, and Laban, of course, did not want to lose that blessing. That was his story. I translated the Hebrew literally at my foot. That's what the text actually says, because we're not sure what it means. Perhaps it referred to his work or his initiatives. Since I wasn't sure, I put it literally at his foot. Now I ask, how did Jacob know that all of the future offspring of the animals would have those characteristics? I don't know. Now, Laban was devious. In verse 34, he said, well, let it be according to your word. Right. He didn't even respect his own word. He changed the wages 10 times within 6 years. You'll find that in 31:41. However, going against God doesn't work very well. Didn't work very well for Laban, and just by the way, it doesn't work very well for our enemies either. That's a nice thought. Now then, notice that Laban put them into the hands of his, put Jacob's animals into the hands of his, Laban's sons. However, of course, those sons were brothers of Leah and Rachel. They were therefore adults. Maybe some of them were middle-aged. The point being, of course, that Jacob's sons were still children. The oldest one, Reuben, wasn't more than 6 years old. Well, they couldn't take care of the sheep. So it's perfectly normal. And of course, since Jacob continued to tend Laban's flock, and it was a 3-day journey between the two flocks, Laban was something. Jacob had no way of keeping an eye of what was happening to his own flock, because they were his flock was in the hand of Laban's sons. However, Jacob's wives were there to keep an eye on what was happening, so that was probably all right. Now let's go on and read verses 37 through 43, which will be the end of this video. Then Jacob took green poplar, almond, and chestnut rods and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the whiteness that was in the rods. And he placed the rods that he had peeled beside the containers, the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, across from them. And they conceived when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived in front of the rods and brought forth young, streaked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob set the young apart. Also, he put the females of the flock with the streaked and black males among Laban's flock. And he set his own flock by itself and did not put them with Laban's flock. Came to pass, whenever the stronger of the flock conceived, that Jacob would place the rods before the eyes of the flock, beside the troughs, that they might conceive in front of the rods. Whenever the flock was weak, he did not place them. So the weaker ones were Laban's, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. Thus the man became extremely prosperous. He had large flocks, male and female slaves, camels, and donkeys. Couple things only here. In verse 40, when Jacob sets the young apart, Well, first, let me talk about the rods. This chestnut rod. We aren't really sure about the species of that tree. We're reasonably sure about the poplar and the almond, but not the chestnut. I have to put something down, right? uh, no, really, it was God who made Jacob's roots work. It wasn't the rod. It didn't have anything to do with it. And Jacob himself acknowledged that in chapter 31, verse 42. He said, it was God who did it, sure. Because Laban changed the wages 10 times every 6 months. Obviously, Laban was watching everything the whole time. So every time he knew what was happening, so he tried to get around it. He was desperately trying to get around God's blessing on Jacob. He tried. He changed the salary 10 times. It wasn't the rods. Jacob thought he was being smart, but just God was taking care of him. That was the whole point. Yes, indeed. Now, really, what we have in verse 43 is strange. Just by the way, when it says that he would set his own flock apart, that'd be the young ones. That they would have to separate those because those were now his. Well, now at the end here, all this tremendous number of flocks and so on. In chapter 32, verses 14 and 15, we learn that the half that Jacob gave to Esau was 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. My comment, if he had camels and donkeys with young, obviously there were males too. 2 + 2 = 4, right? So Jacob had double that much when he left Paddan Aram, which would be around 1,000 animals. And he got all of that in 6 years. Just by the way, it takes a fair amount of pasture to feed 1,000 animals, all right? You need a fair amount of area. Now, the text says that he had slaves. Look, Jacob certainly exchanged animals for slaves as soon as he was able, so that he could get rid of Laban's sons and have his own slaves to take care of his flock. Sure, 2 + 2. Now, donkeys were beasts of burden and camels also. They would be used on the journey back to Canaan. Okay, we'll have Jacob and Esau and Laban next video, God willing. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching, and God bless.